Will was the last person to read last week. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. So, Kaylin, why don't you start us off? Let's begin at the beginning.
I'm sorry. What are we reading?
The U.S. Constitution.
I'm a little behind.
Uh-oh. We're reading the document that this class is about.
Oh.
For the first time on the 4th week. And it's a good day to do it. Today is an important anniversary in American constitutional history. And there's yet another good reason why today is a good day to start reading the Constitution.
We're just starting on Article 1.
Does everybody know what the anniversary is? No, you wouldn't. It's okay. It's all right. 31 years ago today was when I got my commission in the United States Navy. So,
Congratulations.
That's really cool.
Thank you. So crucial event in American constitutional history. Okay. Well, not very crucial. They could have limped along without me, I think. Okay. Go ahead. Start with the preamble.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity.
Posterity.
Yeah. Posterity, my bad. Okay. Do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America.
Okie dokie. So important points are, number one, they tell us who the sovereign is of the United States right in the first 3 words. They remind us who the sovereign is. And because we have to identify who the sovereign is, because the government is there to serve the sovereign, right? The government serves at the sovereign's pleasure. So they remind us who the sovereign is, and now they're going to form a government for that, to serve that sovereign. And it's going to be for ourselves and our posterity. Who's our posterity?
Our children.
Yeah, those who come after us. Just it's the same word as posterior, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the ones who come after us. Okay, now right at the beginning, the first operational sentence of the Constitution. So the preamble is important. But the preamble doesn't really establish any laws or rules. It just gives the purpose and the intention of the right of the authors. But then right away, Article 1, Section 1, Sentence 1, we get a rule, a very, very important one. And we're going to read that rule, and then what we have to do is we have to flip to a couple other places in the Constitution and compare this rule with the equivalent rule that shows up twice more, okay? So, Kaylin, keep going. Article 1, Section 1, Sentence 1.
All the powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of Senate and House of Representatives.
Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, we just got the first important rule. First of all, just to double check, I think we already did this, but to double check, please raise your hand if you are familiar with sort of the classic American social studies concept of
hold on just a second.
Of separation of powers. The whole thing about legislative, executive, and judicial. Raise your hand if you're familiar with that. So, I'm getting hands from everybody. I can't see Taya yet. She hasn't turned on her camera, and it looks like Hannah Nearing. Okay, there you go. But everyone is familiar with that whole concept, right? There's legislative, executive, and judicial. Okay, good. So, and I think we can assume that at least the voting chunk of the American public at the time was also conversant with that idea, that it was something that had been circulating for a very, very long time in American life, so that the founders knew that the people would understand what they were talking about by the legislative power. Okay, so quickly flip to the beginning of Article 2. We're only going to look at one sentence in Article 2. I don't want to interrupt us from Article 1 too long. But let's just look at the first sentence. Kaylin, would you read us the first sentence of Article 2?
The executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States of America.
Okay. And then flip to Article 3 and read the first sentence of that.
The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish.
Okay. Does anyone see a couple of important differences between the way the first sentence, the way the legislative powers are granted, and the way the executive and judicial powers are granted? Anyone spot a difference?
Well, in legislative branches, it says shall be vested.
Okay.
And I wish I had my actual book. I can't find it.
But it says Article 2 uses the term vested also, and Article 3 uses the term vested. So that's not a difference yet. No, they all three sentences use the term vested. But look at this difference.
That's kind of cool.
The Article 2 says the executive power shall be vested. Okay. Article 1, Section 1 says all legislative powers herein granted. Why doesn't it just say all legislative powers? In other words, or why doesn't it just say the legislative power? Because in Article 2 it says the executive power, right? The whole thing, all of it, is vested in the president. But why doesn't it use the same language for the legislature? Why doesn't it use the same language for Congress? Why doesn't it just say the legislative power shall be vested in the Congress? Why is it so? Why is it? First of all, does this language expand the legislative power, or does it limit it?
It's limiting.
Yeah, Kaylin says it's limiting. Explain why.
Well, it's setting the restrictions, putting the guidelines on it. But not.
Okay, so it's limiting it. In other words, Congress does not have all of the legislative power. Congress only has the legislative power herein granted. Okay, the Constitution hasn't told us yet what powers it's granting Congress, right? But it's very clear that Congress does not have the authority to just make any laws it wants to make. We're going to give you, in just a minute, we're going to give you rules about what kinds of laws you can make and what kinds of laws you can't make. Right?
Right.
Okay. And so the reason we don't need to repeat that in the case of the executive and the judicial is that what's happened is there's this excuse me, I'm trying to get my hands there. No, there we go. I can't do hands with the camera. I have a hard time with that. Okay, so if this is all of the legislative power, then the Constitution is going to give Congress a chunk of the legislative power. We don't know how much of a chunk yet, but Congress is going to get a chunk of that. And then of Congress's chunk, all of the powers to execute and enforce and try cases are going to belong to the executive and the judicial, but we don't have to limit them because we've already done it. We've already circumscribed the piece that Congress is allowed to pass laws on, because the executive can only execute the laws that Congress passes, and the judiciary can only rule on cases under laws that Congress has passed. So once we limit Congress, we've also sort of limited the president and the judges as well. This is going to be the chunk that the federal government's going to be in charge of. And so, does that clear to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then there's another crucial thing that the founders did in that sentence that we'll come to a little bit later. So now we're clear, right, that there is this whole vast thing called the legislative power,
Mm-hmm.
power to make laws, and right at the beginning, the Constitution has done two things. It's empowered Congress to pass laws, but it's also limited the range of what laws Congress can pass to a particular set. And then, needless to say, in a minute, we're going to find out what that set is. Okay. So that's something we need to be on the lookout for. It's going to take a couple pages, but we've got to be on the lookout for that. Is what is Congress's, what part of the legislative power belongs to Congress? Okay. What we want to do is the next couple of sections give us the structure of Congress, how it's set up, how the two houses are constituted, and then it's not until section 8 that we come into that we get an answer to that big question we're asking, which is what are Congress's powers? What can it legislate about? So let's move through the structure sections as quickly as possible. I'll just stop when we run into something really important. Okay. So Taylor, why don't you keep going? Oh, I'm sorry. It was Kaylin that was reading. Sorry, Kaylin, you're the reader. Keep going, man.
Are we back in Article 1, or what are we doing now?
Yep, we're in Article 1, Section 2.
Okay. The House of
Because look, the Constitution just said we're going to have a Senate and House of Representatives. So now it better tell us in detail what those are, right? And how they come to be.
The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the election in each state shall have the
Hang on. Read that word carefully.
qualifications.
Nope, the E word.
Electors.
Electors. Okay, because you said elections.
Oh, my bad. Electors.
Electors. Okay, so what's an elector?
Someone who elects, I'm assuming.
Yeah, someone who elects. Okay, so what would be a more contemporary word that we would use for elector?
Electoral college.
Like
Nope.
voter?
Congress?
Yeah, voter. Exactly.
Oh,
voter.
duh.
Yeah, right. Voters. Voter is a more contemporary word, and the other thing, of course, to remember is that nowadays, if you're listening to one of the talking head shows on CNN or Fox or MSNBC, and they're talking about the voters, that's even a synonym, right, for everybody, right, except for kids under 18. Because pretty much everybody can be a voter, right? Back in those days, when this document was written, what did you have to be an elector?
Landowner.
You had to have in almost every state at the time the Constitution was written. There was some sort of property requirement. In some states it was land, like Ethan just said. In other states it was land or movable property in the amount of, and then there was a dollar amount. Okay, so even if you didn't own land, but if you let's say you were a carpenter and you owned your tools, and your tools were worth more than $50, that was good enough in some states. Okay, but there was a property qualification. What else? What other qualifications were there?
You had to be over 21.
Over 21. What else?
You had to be male.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember which was the first state that gave women the vote.
Would you like me to Google it?
No, it's okay. Let's leave it a mystery. Let's leave it a mystery for now.
All right.
Okay, that's a habit we have to get out of. We have to get into a habit of searching our memories before we Google. Don't use Google as your auxiliary brain, right? Okay, so.
As much as they'd like you to do.
Yeah, so you had to be a 21-year-old property owning male, and in some states you had to be white, in others not.
Ooh.
in others not. In fact, I think toward the end of the class, we're going to look at the dissent in the Dred Scott decision of 1857. And one of the things that Justice Curtis points out is that even in North Carolina, which was a southern slaveholding state, a free black person could be a voter, could be an elector. But in some states not. Okay, so yeah, Ethan, go ahead.
Isn't an elector an actual position, like the electoral college? I thought you elected your elector.
The electoral college is a position, yes, because it's a position that's constituted for a particular purpose. But I think you've pointed out something that's really important, which is, yeah, elector is a position, right?
But
Again, it goes back to that. It goes back to who's the sovereign. Who is the sovereign? We the people. And who exercises that sovereignty to appoint, retain, and dismiss the government is the electors, right? That is our power. We don't have the power to pass laws or to write treaties or to rule on cases, on judicial cases. We delegate those tasks to magistrates. But how do we control the magistrates? Well, we have the power to appoint them and to dismiss them through elections. So yeah, being an elector, that is to say being a voter, that is to say being a citizen, is actually an office. And that's something that we almost all Americans tend to forget. But it's a very important office, and we should take it seriously.
it's the only inherited political office in the country.
You know what? I never thought about it that way. Are you quoting something, or is that your own?
No, that was just something that popped in my head.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's an inherited political office. Okay, good point. I like it. Okay, let's see. So, Kaylin, go ahead and finish the sentence, because you'll see what we'll see in the end of this sentence when we talk about the qualifications of electors. We'll see that the Constitution also starts by reminding us of the role of the states in our federal system. So, Kaylin, keep going.
We're in section 2, right? I'm sorry.
Yes, you're in section 2.
I'm really behind.
And the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the legislature.
Of the state legislature.
The
Right.
state
So, okay,
word.
so if you wanted to be cynical, if you wanted to be jokey, you could say, and especially since the Super Bowl was day before yesterday, you could say, well, so the founders started the Constitution by punting, right? Because there's a pressing question, right? If we the people, if the citizenry are the sovereign, now there's right away a really important question: who are we the people? Who are the citizens? Who are the electors? And what does the Constitution do? It punts it to the states. How do we decide whether someone is a qualified elector for Congress, for the House of Representatives? Well, it's whatever the states say. If I'm a qualified elector for the most numerous branch of the state legislature, which is probably the state House of Representatives, or in some states it's called the Assembly. If I'm qualified to vote for state assembly, then I'm qualified to vote for the House of Representatives. And if I'm not, then I'm not. Right? So it's up to the states to decide the rules of eligibility. Now, as I say, if you want to be cynical, you could say that the founders punted. But on the other hand, they did something really important. First of all, they preserved the domestic peace by starting off by saying, we're not going to get into a pissing contest between the different states as to what the qualifications for electors should be, right? We have enough to argue about. We're not going to start on that one, okay? And also that we're reminding ourselves that this is a federal system, so that even though the Constitution is going to tell us that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the United States government is the supreme authority, but the states, we have a dual system, so the states retain their sovereignty under our system. And there are plenty of things that the federal government cannot do to the states. They retain their own sovereignty. And this is one way in which they exercise their sovereignty, is they decide what the qualifications are for electors. Again, does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, this is something that confuses a lot of people, including it even confuses modern day journalists who have been to graduate school. You know, it's like, well, make up your mind. Is our system a national government with a United States government, or is it a federation of sovereign states?
Yes.
And yes, the answer is yes. Right? And if you can't keep both of those ideas in your own in your head at the same time, you probably shouldn't write about politics. Okay.
That should be a law.
Yeah. Wouldn't that?
But then it would mess up the whole free
would
speech.
interfere with the First Amendment.
So-
Okay.
Yeah, the free speech.
Okay. So
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
what we will do just for now. We'll probably come back to it later, but for now, we'll skip over the whole business about we'll skip over the whole next set of clauses, and Kaylin, so skip over this whole long discussion about census and enumeration and persons held to service for a term of years. Skip over that whole thing, and then let's just go down to the vacancies clause.
Vacancies happen in the representation, that one?
Yes.
Okay. The vacancies happen in the representation from any state. The executive authority, therefore, shall issue
Thereof. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thereof.
Yeah.
Thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies.
Okay. So we're going, if we flip forward to the Senate, as we'll see in just a minute, we'll see that when a vacancy happens in the Senate, the executive authority, that is, in most states, what's that? What's the executive authority called in most states?
The governor.
The governor, thank you. So, in fact, as far as I know, in every state it's called the governor.
Yeah.
So we'll see in a minute
Yeah.
that when a vacancy happens in the Senate, the governor can just make a temporary appointment. He can appoint the replacement senator until the legislature meets, and then they'll elect the permanent replacement. But in the House, when a vacancy happens in the House, the governor can't just appoint the person. The governor has to issue writs of election to fill the vacancy. Why is that? Isn't I thought the Senate was more important than the House, or the more prestigious than the House. So surely if the governor can appoint temporary senators, why can't the governor appoint temporary representatives?
Because the representatives are just that. They're the representatives of the people, where the Senate is supposed to be the more
Yeah, who does the Senate,
classy.
in the original
style.
scheme, in the original scheme of the Constitution? It's changed. This has been one of the huge changes that was made. But in the original scheme of the Constitution, who exactly do the senators represent?
A state.
Yeah, who said that? Was that Will?
Yeah.
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 The senators represent the states. So it's the House that represents the people. So we can't have the state officials messing with the people's choice of who's going to represent them in the House. So when a representative resigns or dies or gets thrown out, by the way, we're going to find out the House has the power to throw them out. When we have a vacancy in the House, the governor has to issue writs of election so that the people can fill the vacancy, because the House is supposed to be answerable only to the people. Okay, whereas the senators are supposed to represent their states. Okay. Next, Kaylin, let's wrap up section 2.
All right. The House The House of Representatives.
It's too early in the day for words that have that many syllables, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The House of
It's all good.
Representatives, shall choose their speaker and other officers, and shall have the sole power of impeachment.
Okay, and I one more little parenthetical comment here, which is that once again, this is another reason why we spent so much time on the English Bill of Rights, is that this document it does have a certain historical context, and one aspect of the historical context is that the people to whom the people who wrote it and the people to whom it's addressed, that is, the people who are going to be reading it, the people who are going to be ratifying it, the people who are going to be living under it, they're presumed to understand how the English system works. So that when we talk about a house, that is a legislative house, we presume that we already know what that means because we know what Parliament is and how Parliament works. And so when we talk about a legislative house, and then when we talk about members, it's interesting, it's one of the interesting things that I just noticed recently was that when we look at Section 3 is going to tell us how many votes each senator gets. And there's a reason for that, which we'll see. But notice that the Constitution doesn't worry about telling us how many votes each member of the House gets. Because again, it's supposedly self-evident. If you know how Parliament works, of course each member gets one vote. The reason that the Constitution is going to have to clear it up in the case of the Senate is because of the fact that the senators are representing their states. So there could be a misunderstanding that people could think that, oh, there's 2 senators from each state, but the 2 of them together only get 1 vote. So they have to caucus, they have to decide how they're going to vote. No, the Constitution is going to tell us, no, each senator gets 1 vote. So does that mean they could cancel each other out? Yes, that's what it means. They could, if they wanted to, they could cancel each other out. But with the House, the Constitution doesn't need to tell us that each member gets 1 vote, because that's how it works in a legislative assembly like Parliament, is every member gets 1 vote. Okay? And then the other thing, the other carryover from Parliament is that this House of Representatives is going to be a fairly sizable body. There's going to be, already 70 or 80 people in it right at the very beginning. And that's too many for everybody to just talk at once or talk as they feel like it. It's not going to be a very collegial body. It's going to require some order right from the very beginning. So they shall choose their speaker and other officers. Again, if you ask, what's a speaker? Well, again, you've got a 1,000-year tradition. The House of Commons in Parliament has a speaker. And the speaker, among other things, the speaker sets the agenda for every day's business, and the speaker chooses who gets to talk next. And when a member wants to speak, the member has to raise his hand or stand up and say, Madam Speaker or Mr. Speaker, and then the speaker has to recognize that person before they can speak. Okay? So again, there's this presumption of tradition that everyone knows what all this means. Okay? All right. And Kaylin, you want to do section 3?
Sure.
Yeah, keep going. You're doing it.
The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote.
Okay. Okay. So then the next big chunk is how we divide up the Senate into 3 classes, so that 1/3 of the Senate is going to be reelected, is going to be up for election every year, but not more than 1/3. So the majority of the senators continue on from one Congress to the next. So the House, everybody gets freshly elected every 2 years. So that, again, this is part of our deep legislative theory, is that we number our Congresses by a new House election. So the very first Congress to sit in 1789 was the first Congress. Okay, 2 years later, we got a new House of Representatives election, and we got a new Congress. So now it's the second Congress. But 2/3 of the senators are still carrying over from the first Congress. So one of the relevancies of that is that whereas the House essentially, in some legal respects, the House dissolves itself and then reconstitutes itself every 2 years. Every 2 years, there has to be a new election for Speaker of the House. Okay, because it's a brand new body. Even if 90% of the members just got reelected, but yeah, they got reelected. They got a new term. Okay, whereas the Senate is a continuing body, and the Senate can keep the same roster of officers from 1 year to the next. Okay, so we already have all these two very different legislative bodies with two different kinds of rules.
So the Senate,
Yeah, go ahead.
the Senate is, you said they get elected every 3 years?
Well,
2, right?
there's going to be an election every 2 years,
Okay.
and 100% of the representatives have to be
Every year
elected every
cycle.
2 years, and 33% of the senators have to be elected
Okay.
every 2 years. Okay, but that means 66% of the senators don't have to be elected every 2 years. 66% are going to still continue in office because they get 6-year terms, right? The only people who are unlucky in this equation are the 1/3 of the first batch of senators ever elected only get to be there for 2 years because
Oh, that's lame.
that's how they're going to start the ruling system. Is they're going to throw dice, right, or pick straws, and in the first Congress, 1/3 of the senators are going to expire. Their terms are going to expire in 2 years. Another third are going to expire in 4 years, and the final third are going to keep their jobs for 6 years. But then after that, every new class of senators that's elected is going to keep their jobs for 6 years. So the first group got unlucky because they had to somehow, you have to start this whole staggered election system running. You have to start that running, right?
You don't get a powerful Senate, so you just have its,
You break it up. So
yeah.
okay, I'm not trying to confuse anybody. I think it'll become very clear.
No, yeah.
Raise your hand if it's already clear to you how this all works. Okay.
Okay, sucks.
Good. Okay. Kaylin, keep going.
Okay. Immediately after they shall be assembled and...
Oh no, this is the part you can skip. This is the part we just said that confused everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
Where do you want me to start?
No person shall be a senator.
Yeah, you could start that. You could start that because we already did the whole vacancies thing.
Okay. No person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years and be 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state for which he shall be chosen.
Okay. Yep. And so we have that's a qualification for both the House and the Senate, is you have to be from that state. Okay, you have to be an inhabitant of that state. Now, I just want to very quickly point out, because this is one of those interesting political science questions that everybody should think about. At least for 10 minutes, you should think about it. This is one way in which our Congress is different than the English Parliament.
Really?
So in the English Parliament, it was this way back in the 18th century, and it's still this way today. In the English Parliament, you don't have to be from a district to represent that district. In fact, most members of the English Parliament aren't from the district that they represent. The way it works in England is that that each of the political parties will have a committee in each district, and the committee will choose who is going to run, who's going to stand for election for Parliament from that district. And they very often don't choose someone from that district. They often choose just some hotshot political person, some lawyer or lobbyist or whatever who lives in London. You know, a large percentage of the members of Parliament are Londoners or people from other big fancy cities that have big fancy university degrees, or they were maybe they were military heroes or whatever. But they're people from anywhere in the country, and they get recruited by, you know, if I'm the Labour Party constituency committee in Dorset, I want to get a good candidate who can win in the next election. I don't care where I get that candidate from. Maybe there's a gal or a guy in Dorset that will do. So I'll have him. But maybe there's somebody from London or Manchester or somewhere else who would do a better job. So I recruit that person, and they stand for election for my constituency, even though they're not from there. Now, do these people try to spend a lot of time in their constituency? Do they learn the ropes? You go around and meet everybody, shake hands, doorbell? Yeah. Do they try to learn what the issues are that are important to that district? Yeah, they do. Sure, of course, because they have to give speeches. They have to appeal to votes for votes. But are they necessarily from that district? No, they could be from anywhere. And the reason I mention this is because the English think it's a good system and it works for them. The English idea is, you know what? Real political talent, the ability to understand the voters, what they want, what they need, the ability to relate to them, the ability to articulate their concerns, the ability to finagle legislation in Parliament that will benefit them. That kind of political ability is really rare. It's really rare, and we might not have anyone in our district who can do it. So we should have the freedom to pick a smart gal or guy from anywhere and have him represent us in Parliament. The American system is, no, that's not going to work for us. No. Somebody represents us in the House. They have to be from us. They have to be from our group. Okay. You should think about it. Decide which one you agree. Were the founders right? Do it that way, or should we have gone with the English system? Just think about it. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot and ask them, but it's something to think about. But that's one area where we made a very conscious choice to break from the English way of doing things. Maybe the founders were right. Maybe they were wrong. Don't know. Think about it for yourself.
Well, I think part of the reason why they did that is because to avoid the whole taxation without representation thing. Because if they did get a person in Parliament, he could just be some hotshot from London who has no idea what life on the frontier is like.
Yeah.
And is representing them.
Yeah.
And not really defending them at all.
Okay.
Whereas with this system, they'd have to send one of their own people who does understand.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in other words,
Captain.
the founders are saying we don't want our representatives to feel that they are like a professional class. We really want them to feel like they're of the people, that they came from this district, and damn it, if they don't do a good job, they get sent home to this district. Kaylin, what were you going to say?
Well, on the flip side of that, though, you can also think about it as the way the British did it. It's actually a little bit can also be smart, because, like, yes, on one end you are doing it from the point of view from the people, but then you could very well get a leader that is uneducated and unversed in what's going on.
Well, yeah, but they did that with Davy Crockett, and he did just fine.
Well, that's one example.
But what this discussion shows, right, is that there are obviously advantages and disadvantages to both, and but the founders made a choice. And again, so it's just something to think about why they chose that, and you know, something to think about. Okay, let's see. I'll tell you what. We can skip for now. We'll skip the rest of section 3. I just want to read section 4 really quickly. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators. Okay, so Congress, so the states can make rules about how we're going to do elections, and then Congress can come in and preempt the state rules, except for the place of choosing senators. Why is that the exception? Nevaeh, I want to put you on the spot here. Just for I want to put you on the spot. Why,
Okay.
why is that something Congress cannot dictate to the states? The place of choosing senators. This actually goes to one of the specific
Can't find it.
in the Declaration of Independence.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna get you to figure out which one it is. Okay. So so who is choosing the senators?
I think like when they start with voting or like electing them.
In the Constitution, right? Kaylin just read it to us. Who's
Right.
choosing the senators? Go back to the beginning of section 3.
I'm there. I'm not very smart.
You are smarter than you think.
Oh. 2 senators from each state?
Yeah, and who chooses them?
Oh, hang on. Chosen by Jesus. Chosen by legislator.
Legislature. The legislature.
go.
So it's the state legislature that's going to choose the senators.
There we go.
Okay. Now,
Sorry, I just woke up and I closed last night at my work.
okay, so Nevaeh, I've got another question for you.
Okay.
Where does the state legislature meet?
Hang on.
Well, what state are you in?
Montana.
Where does the state legislature of Montana meet?
I don't even know. You really picked the wrong person, man. I have no brain.
Well, does the state legislature, do they meet like, at the top of Big Bear Mountain?
Do
they meet
have a hall, I think. Like at the the Capitol.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
They meet
Why did that take me so long?
because it's early in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Early in the morning. Okay, so they
I'm sorry.
and which capital do they meet at? Do they meet in Olympia, Washington, or in Sacramento, California?
What was the
or
capital? Was
Peter,
it Washington
South
then too? Was it Washington, D.C.? Was it D.C. back then? Probably not.
Nope.
The capital of the state is what he's referring to.
Yeah, they meet
Oh,
they meet
okay.
in the state capital, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And and at the time the Constitution was written, at the
I'm a
time
blonde. Okay.
every state already had a capital, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's already a done deal. The legislature knows where they meet. They meet at the state capitol, right?
Yeah.
And so if you remember from the Declaration of Independence, one of the specific grievances was that the king has forced the colonial legislatures to meet at unusual places distant from the repository of their public records. In other words, force them to meet in places other than the state capitol. or the colonial capital,
Oh, right.
right? So,
Ugh.
so
Like when they met at
So
the tavern.
the founders are saying that ain't going to happen here, right? Congress can make rules for elections, but Congress cannot make rules for the place of choosing senators, because the state legislature is going to choose the senators, and the state legislature is going to want to meet at its capital because that's where its records are, that's where its offices are. So we're not going to have Congress telling the state legislature that, yeah, you can choose your senators, but you have to drive to the other side of the state to do it, right?
Right.
No, the place of choosing senators, that's decided by the states, okay? All right, so I think what we're going to do is, oh, you know what? We're not cruising quite as fast as I wanted to, but that's okay. That's okay. We're doing good. We've got to do the rest of section 4. Kaylin, you were still reading, right? So keep going. The rest of section 4.
Okay. The time, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and
Oh, no,
representatives.
I just read that. You can skip to the next sentence.
Oh, the next sentence. The Congress shall assemble at least once in every year in such
Is
meeting.
someone pounding meat at your house?
I think it's a dishwasher or like a
Oh,
washer.
sorry. Kaylin, sorry, keep going. I'm sorry. Start over. I apologize.
You're good. The Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meetings shall be on the first Monday in December, unless they shall by law appoint a different day.
Okay. So, all right. So here's what we want to do right now. I'm gonna try to do this really quickly, because I made you a promise, I think, on the second day of class, that all 13 of the items, the principles in the English Bill of Rights, are going to show up in our Constitution. So it's time for me to start fulfilling that promise. So would everybody please pull up their copy of the English Bill of Rights and roll down to the middle of page 2 where the 13 things are listed.
Okay, so I just used the email, like the digital one. Which
Okay.
email is that again?
Sorry, don't remember.
That's fine. I'll just search for it.
I send too many emails. What can I tell you?
If I'm behind, that's my fault.
But everyone's going to remember this one, right? Because it's the last one. That for redress of all grievances and for the amending, strengthening, and preserving of the laws, parliaments ought to be held frequently, right? And so there it is in our Constitution. The Congress shall assemble at least once in every year. I mean, that may not sound like frequently to us because we live in the 21st century, which is a 24/7 cycle. Frequently means you get 200 likes on your Facebook page. That's frequently, right? But no, remember that sometimes in
Hey.
that in the 17th century England, one of the crises that revolved around the whole English Civil War and the Cromwell thing and the executing Charles I, there was this period called the Long Parliament, where one parliament sat for 20 years. And of course, it didn't meet very much during those 20 years. And of course, this was a huge problem for most people in the kingdom that, hey, it's been 20 years, we haven't had an election for parliament. What's going on here, right? So the whole business about parliament shall meet frequently, once a year would have satisfied the authors of the English Bill of Rights. They would have, if they had seen this provision in the U.S. Constitution, they would say, yeah, that's the way to go. Congress shall meet at least once every year, okay? And by the way, just sort of a U.S. history thing, and that meeting shall be on the first Monday in December, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. Why the first Monday in December? Why is that? Does that tell us something about the kind of country this was at the time? Why not? It's warmer in August. Why not the first Monday in August?
Harvest.
Or
Did they just
You know-
pick a random day?
Oh, no.
I don't think so.
Does
I
it
don't
have to
think that,
reflect the end of the year?
Ethan?
and why?
Harvest. August is harvest.
Yeah, August,
Everyone is
September-
working the rest of the year.
August, September,
Oh.
your heart, yeah. So a lot of the members of Congress are going to be farmers, or they're going to have duties that are tied to the agricultural cycle, and so
Family comes first.
yeah. So September and October are the harvest months. November is when you're putting up everything for winter. You know, you're canning and salting and pickling and preserving. You got a lot to do to make sure you have something to eat in February, right? So yeah, the first Monday in December. So by then you're done. Everything that's got to be stored and preserved is stored and preserved. You can afford to take some time off to go and serve in Congress. So yeah, first Monday in December, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. We don't. In other words, again, the founders are saying we don't know how conditions might change. The weather might change. Technology might change. Maybe we've come to a point where almost none of the congressmen is a farmer. So if they want to change the day, they can, and they have. By the way, you know, now it's the first Monday in January instead of the first Monday in December. Okay. And then there are a couple of others on our list of 13. There are a couple of others that we've already sort of touched on, but we'll nail them down more firmly a little later. Okay. Kaylin, you've been doing such a great job. Keep going. Let's do section 5. And see how much. Let's see if we can get through section 5 before we wrap up.
All right, do you want me to just keep reading and not pause?
Yeah.
Okay. Each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members, and a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do.
Raise your hand if that's a new word. If quorum is a new word.
Forum or quorum?
Quorum. Is quorum a new word?
I've heard it before.
You've heard it? Okay.
Heard it before.
That's because I read dictionaries for fun, though. So
Okay, good. That's important. Wait, who said that? Was that Nevaeh?
yeah, it was.
She's dumb, but she reads dictionaries for fun.
Yeah, I don't think that adds up.
I sense a contradiction.
Yeah.
I sense a contradiction there. I think she was being self-deprecating. I don't think she's dumb. Okay.
Okay.
So a quorum is just in every deliberative body, whether it's the board of directors of the Google Corporation of Alphabet Inc., which is the parent company of Google, the board of directors of Google, or whether it's the board of directors of the Elks Lodge in Bozeman, Montana, or whether it's Congress of the United States. Every deliberative body has a rule about what is a quorum. So a quorum is just the minimum number of members of the body that you have to have in order to do business. And again, the Constitution says right there, a majority of each shall constitute a quorum. Okay? Which, by the way, if you think about it, it's pretty scary, right? Because now there's now 434 members. No, 400 and I'm stuck on the number. There's something like 400 and I want to say 432 members of the House of Representatives.
I thought it was 431.
Say again.
I thought it was 431, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's 432, but I could be wrong. Could be wrong. We'll double check. That's what Wikipedia is for. But there's 432, which means that a quorum is only 218 or 217, 200 something like that, right? So
I do not like that.
So, don't if you care about your bill getting passed or not getting passed, don't stay out too late partying, because the rest of the guys could show up and gals could show up and pass and vote down your law when you're not even there. Okay, so and then as the smaller number may be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members. And this actually has happened a few times in U.S. history, that the House of Representatives has a sergeant of arms, and the sergeant at arms actually has his own little police force. And there have been times where the House has some important business to do. There's something really important on the agenda, and they show up in the morning and there's not a quorum. The sergeant at arms can actually go out around Washington, D.C. and arrest the members of the House who haven't showed up and drag them into the chamber.
That's awesome.
So that we have a quorum, right? And that's something that's happened a few times. Okay, it happens much more often with state legislatures, where members of the state legislature will not only will they not show up because they're trying to prevent a quorum from happening, they will not only not show up, but they will to be out of the power of the majority, they will go and hide in a neighboring state, because the
sergeant at arms has no authority there.
Sergeant at arms has no, and the state police have no authority there.
That's dirty.
So they'll rent some rooms in a motel right across the state line, and they'll just hang out there until they get enough publicity for whatever their cause is. That happens frequently in American history.
There should be laws against that. Like, you have to show up every Monday morning. You can't leave the state capitol.
There is no law against it. The issue is if a legislator does that, if a legislator ducks a quorum and escapes, what do his electors think of that?
Oh.
His electors will punish him for not showing up to do his job.
Somebody's not going to be
On the
really.
other hand, maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll think, yeah, stick it to the man. That's what you should have been doing, right? So it's
find a
again,
court
up to
real
the
quick.
sovereign people whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Okay. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen, it's 9 o'clock. I don't want to tax your patience too much. Let me conclude with a few housekeeping notes. First of all, don't forget that your papers are due on Sunday. We've already had 2 early turn-ins. I would encourage you to turn in your paper as quickly as you can, rather than be a deadline fighter. Something that I didn't brag about in the syllabus for the course, in the advertisement for the course. I didn't brag about it because I don't like to brag about it, but writing and editing is something that I have done professionally. It's one of the 2 things that I actually do at a professional level. Another one is cook. So
What?
So if you I'm more than happy to give you the full benefit of my professional expertise as far as training you to be writers. And I know from experience that writing is one of the hardest skills that high school students struggle with. So if you want, first of all, as far as I'm concerned, every class I teach is a writing class. This is a history civics class, but it's also a writing class, because you're going to write papers, and I'm going to critique them and edit them. But I wasn't planning to give you guys, to send you like some extra help, extra exercises, little handouts to read. That'll be on demand. If you want that, I'll send it. Just let me know by email or whatever, and I'll send you that stuff. But yes, I would, any help I can give you in becoming a better writer, I am happy to give you. And that is something that's at the very top of my list of professional qualifications. I can be of help. So yeah, Kaylin, go ahead.
Who'd you? Were you like a newspaper writer or editor? Or
No.
what'd you do?
When I say professional, I never had a byline or anything, but I think it's fair to call myself a professional, because first of all, first of all, I've done a lot. It was my job to write stuff. When I worked in public policy, it was my job to write stuff. Most of what I wrote did not get published under my name in a newspaper or a magazine article. A lot of it was ghostwriting for my boss. Some of it got published under my name, but it was things like pamphlets. If you Google me, you might be able to find one or two things that I've written. I don't know, maybe, but it's it's something that I've done at a high level, and I've done it for political candidates. So yeah,
That's really cool.
I call myself a professional writer. Yeah, right. Yeah, like I said,
Yeah, it's whatever, right?
That's super cool, dude.
there aren't many skills that I have at a professional level, but that's one of them. Okay, you should all be so lucky, right?
So you're a cook, a writer, and a teacher,
And you were in the Navy.
and you were in the Navy.
Who said I was a professional teacher? I mean, I have a master. I have a master's degree. I have a master's.
You're pretty pro at teaching us.
We already established what that means, right? Okay.
He's just
Teaching
casually
me
just
takes
pausing
skill.
now.
Yeah. When I taught at Founders Academy in 2014, I was actually considered to be a highly qualified teacher.
Oh my, that's awesome,
by the
dude.
state of Nevada, and my response to that was, well, the joke's on the state of Nevada, right?
Mr. Fairsign is just like low-key flexing now, but
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Just like,
Weird flex, but okay.
No, I do not consider myself a professional teacher yet. Come on, give me a few years and maybe, right? Anyway, okay. So are there any urgent questions that we should address before everybody signs off? Yeah.
Are we allowed to partner up for this writing this essay?
No, that's something that you really need to do on your own, and that's
All right, cool.
that's why it's so hard, right? And as I said to Taylor, the biggest dragon you have to slay when you write is the fear of the empty page.
Oh my gosh, I hate it so much.
That is the biggest dragon you have to slay, the fear of the empty page. And once you slay that dragon, there's still several more dragons, but they're much smaller and they don't breathe fire. Yeah, Kaylin, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you one more question. Is there any details or bases you'd like to cover before about the essay? Just like an overview or a heads up about something?
No.
Like anything you?
I tried to make the assignment itself as concise as possible. It's only a 2-page paper or a 1 and 2 page paper. Go ahead and follow 5-paragraph essay format, which is, you have an introductory paragraph, you have 3 body paragraphs. Your introductory paragraph says, this is what I think, and I'm going to make 3 points. And then each body paragraph makes a point. And then there's a conclusion at the end. In conclusion, I have proven the following 3 points. Right?
Yeah, all I was asking was simply if there is like anything on there that you didn't add that you would preferably like to see in the paper. That's all I was asking.
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, I think we've had 2 papers turned in so far. One of them, and they make completely different points about. Yeah. So we're good. There's a range.
So they can be like any style.
Whatever style, whatever your style is, right?
Oh man. Man.
You have to develop your own style.
Just wait till you see mine.
Don't.
Oh man.
So when I was learning computer programming back in the 70s, and by the way, I was never very good at that, so I'm not a professional at that. But when I was learning computer programming back in the 70s, I had a very good book, and the first thing the book said was, "Do not break the rules before learning them."
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so true.
So when Hannah asked me what style you could write in, hey, start with 5-paragraph essay, the most boring. Start with start with writing complete sentences, and then you'll your own style will develop. Believe me, that's not something to worry about, right?
So
same thing with art.
Yep.
I'm not trying to brag, but
oh my God, that's scary.
Is it scary?
I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. It's like
I think it's cute.
a skeleton.
Thank you. I've been sketching it the whole lesson instead of paying
So
attention.
we
Just
know.
kidding. I paid. Just kidding. I paid attention. I will draw a dog next lesson.
You're going to have to have a night light tonight.
I will draw a dog.
Okay.
I promise.
Thank you. All right. Any other, Taylor, you had one more question? Are you good?
No, I'm done. I'm good.
Okay. Gentlemen, I will get a couple of lectures recorded with some of this background, because raise your hand if you've heard of the Articles of Confederation, which was that was
Somewhat, barely.
Articles, yeah, because that was our government before the Constitution, and
Oh yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
so
Yeah,
so normally
barely.
we would have spent a full class session on the Articles of Confederation, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted to get into the Constitution. So I'll do a little bit about the Articles of Confederation, and then so the Confederation Congress. I'll just leave you with this note. Under the Articles of Confederation, there was no executive, right? There was no president. There was no federal judiciary. All there was a Congress of the United States. And that Congress was very clunky, kludgy Congress. It was almost impossible for it to get anything done. And it really didn't get very much of anything done. In more than 10 years, it basically accomplished three things that are worthy of note. One is it fought the Revolutionary War and won. So that's a pretty good thing. The second thing was it called the Constitutional Convention, and that turned out pretty well. And then the third thing it did, while the Constitutional Convention was meeting, maybe just it was inspired by the fact that the Constitutional Convention was meeting, and while the Constitutional Convention was meeting, Congress actually passed the old Confederation Congress, right? Not the new Congress, in 1787. In its dying breath, the Confederation Congress passed one of the most important pieces of legislation ever in the history of North America, which was the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And that ordinance becomes really, really important because, first of all, it laid out the rules for how this whole bunch of what became new states of Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois were going to come into the Union. Okay? And it also laid out certain rules which sort of give us a window for interpreting some of the Constitution. Since it happened in the same year. The Constitution was written in 1787. The Northwest Ordinance was written in 1787. So they were written in the same year under the authority of the same Congress. So we can use one to sort of shed some light on the other. And so we want to look at that. That's what I think that's what the bulk of the lecture will be about the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, because it is such an important law. Okay. I think yeah, go ahead, Will.
Did you send a lecture out this week from
No,
last week?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
I didn't get one, so I'm like, did I miss this?
I was looking for that
I
too.
didn't. I didn't,
Okay.
because I was traveling, so I took a couple days off. Okay, but we'll get something out this week. Good.
Okay.
All right. Pleasure seeing all of your bright, shining faces. See you next week. Stopping